Why it sucked to be a medieval knight. You open your eyes. You're in a drafty stone keep. Your armor is rusty. Your squire has fleas. Congratulations, you're a knight. And it's about to get much worse. Waking up when the roosters start screaming. The first light of dawn creeps through the arrow slit that passes for a window in your chamber. You're not sleeping in a luxurious four-poster bed with silk sheets and plush pillows. No, you're on a straw mattress that hasn't been changed in months. It's infested with lice, fleas, and possibly a family of mice that have taken up residence in the corner. The mattress sits atop wooden slats that creak with every slight movement, ensuring you never quite achieve deep sleep. Your body aches from yesterday's training. Your chainmail shirt, which you've slept in because you're paranoid about midnight. Raids has left rust marks on your skin and indentations that look like you've been mauled by a very methodical bear. Your head pounds from last night's ale-watered down swill that tasted like it was filtered through a horse blanket. But it was better than the water, which would likely kill you faster than any enemy sword. The cold seeps into your bones. Winter, in 12th century England, is not kind to anyone, least of all to those living in stone structures specifically designed to prioritize defense over comfort. The meager fire in your chamber's hearth died hours ago, and no one has come to relight it because your squire is busy tending to your horse, which, if we're being honest, receives better care than you do. You try to rise, but your body protests. At the ripe old age of 28, you're already considered past your prime. Your right shoulder never quite healed from that tournament 3 years ago. Your left knee makes an alarming clicking sound whenever you bend it, and you're almost certain you've got the beginnings of gout in your big toe. Medieval medicine's solution to all of these ailments. Leech's prayer and more ale. The grueling process of putting on armor, your squire, Thomas, finally appears. He's a gangly boy of 14, with a perpetual sniffle and hands rough from scrubbing rust off your armor. He bows awkwardly, nearly tripping over the bucket of water he's brought for your morning ablutions. "My lord," he mumbles, "the Baron expects you on the training grounds by prime." Prime, the second canonical hour, roughly 6 a.m. The Baron is a stickler for punctuality, despite having never been on time for anything in his life. You grunt and begin the arduous process of dressing. First, the brise linen undergarments that haven't been washed in weeks because, contrary to popular belief, medieval hygiene was awful. The general consensus was that bathing opened your pores to disease, so you generally avoided it except for special occasions, like your wedding or the day you were knighted. Next comes the gambeson, a padded jacket that serves as the foundation. For your armor, it's stained with sweat, blood, some of it yours, some not, and various unidentifiable substances. It smells like a combination of wet dog, stale beer, and despair. Thomas helps you pull it over your head, and you immediately feel 15 pounds heavier and 10 degrees warmer. The gambeson is designed to absorb the impact of blows, but what it mostly absorbs is your body odor, trapping it against you like a putrid second skin. Now for the chainmail. A full hauberk weighs between 30 and 50 pounds, depending on the length and thickness of the links. Yours is on the heavier side because you're paranoid about arrows finding gaps in your armor. Thomas hoists it up, his skinny arms straining, and you duck into it like you're entering a very heavy, very uncomfortable tent. The metal links settle onto your shoulders, immediately compressing your spine and making your back spasm in protest. Wearing your chainmail feels like doing cardio in a damp metal sock full of regret. The weight isn't evenly distributed, so it pulls on different parts of your body with every movement. The edges of the links occasionally catch your skin or the hairs on your arms, giving you constant, tiny pinpricks of pain throughout the day. And it makes a sound like jangling coins with every step, announcing your presence to everyone within earshot, including potential enemies. Your squire fastens your belt around your waist, securing the chainmail so it doesn't shift too much as you move. From this belt hangs your sword, a 3-pound length of steel that cost more than most peasants will earn in their lifetime. It's a status symbol as much as a weapon, and you treat it with more care than you do most people. Thomas hands you your shield, emblazoned with your coat of arms, wolf on a field of blue, representing the noble lineage you're desperate to believe you have, despite being the third son of a minor lord with more land than sense. Finally, your helmet. It's a simple, conical design with a nasal guard, offering protection while still allowing you to see and breathe somewhat. Once it's on, your peripheral vision is severely limited, and the sounds of the world outside become muffled and distant. Your own breathing echoes loudly in your ears, giving you the constant sensation of being followed by someone with asthma. The entire process has taken nearly 30 minutes, and you're already sweating profusely. Your shoulders ache from the weight, your back is cramping, and you haven't even made it out of your chamber yet. You stagger toward the door, moving with all the grace of a drunk bear in a fishing net. Hygiene, or total lack thereof, before you head to the training grounds. You perform what passes for your morning hygiene routine. Thomas hands you a wooden cup of water, which you use to rinse your mouth. You spit the water into the chamber pot, along with, apparently, a small amount of blood from your receding gumser. Common problem when your diet consists primarily of tough bread, stringy meat, and ale. You run your fingers through your hair, which is greasy enough to lubricate a siege engine, and scratch at your beard, dislodging crumbs from last night's meal and possibly a small insect. You don't bathe regularly, maybe once every few weeks if you're particularly fastidious, or once a season if you're like most of your fellow knights. Instead, you rely on changing your linen undergarments when you remember, and occasionally washing your hands and face. Your teeth are in a state that would make a modern dentist faint. You scrub them occasionally with a frayed twig, or rub them with a cloth, but the concept of dental hygiene is rudimentary at best. Several of your back teeth are rotten, causing intermittent pain that you treat by clove oil when you can get it, or more commonly, by drinking yourself into oblivion. Will you be visiting the garderobe before training, my lord? Thomas asks, referring to the castle's primitive toiletry, essentially a hole in a stone seat that drops waste directly down the castle wall into the moat or cesspit below. The thought of perching over that freezing hole, exposed to the morning air and the indignity of publicly audible bodily functions, makes you grimace. Later, you mutter, although you know later often means holding it until you're in genuine pain because privacy is a luxury not afforded to anyone in the 12th century, even knights. The real knightly diet. You make your way to the Great Hall. For breakfast, your armor announcing your arrival with every clanking step. The hall is already bustling with activity servants, preparing for the day. Other knights and manatams breaking their fast, and the baron's hunting dogs fighting over scraps beneath the tables. The morning meal is simple and uninspiring. A trencher of stale bread serves as your plate, soaking up the juices from a hunk of salted pork that's been boiled until it resembles leather more than meat. There's a bowl of potager thick stew made from whatever vegetables could be found, mostly cabbage, onions, and turnips at this time of year, with a few beans thrown in for substance. Its bland, under-seasoned salt is expensive and lukewarm at best. but it's filling and will give you the energy you need for the day's training. You wash it down with small beer-a-week ale that's safer to drink than water, because the brewing process kills most pathogens. Everyone drinks it, from young children to the elderly, because the alternative is risking dysentery from contaminated water sources. The taste is sour and yeasty, but you barely notice anymore. This monotonous diet is your daily reality. Forget the lavish feasts depicted in modern movies. Those are reserved for special occasions and high holidays. Day-to-day meals for even a night are repetitive and nutritionally questionable. Fresh fruit is a rarity, appearing only in late summer and early autumn. Vegetables are seasonal and limited. Meat is often preserved by salting or smoking, making it tough and overly salty. Spices that might make this bland fare more palatable are prohibitively expensive and used sparingly. If at all, the result is a diet high in carbohydrates, deficient in certain vitamins, and hard on your digestive system. It's no wonder that intestinal complaints are common. Your teeth are failing, and you frequently suffer from headaches and lethargy. The modern conception of the night as a peak physical specimen ignores the reality that your body is constantly fighting against the limitations of medieval nutrition as you finish your meal. You tear off a piece of your bread trencher, now soggy with meat juices and gravy, and toss it to one of the Baron's hunting dogs. The animal snaps it up eagerly, and you can't help but think that in some ways the dog has a better life than you do. At least it doesn't have to wear chains. Life in a castle. You exit the great hall into the castle bailey, the courtyard, surrounded by the inner walls. The castle is not the pristine, picturesque structure depicted in children's stories. It's a working military installation, dirty and functional rather than beautiful. The bailey is muddy from recent rain, churned up by horses and foot traffic. The smell is an unholy combination of horse manure, human waste, despite the presence of garderobes. Not everyone uses them, rotting food scraps, and the smoke from dozens of cooking fires. The noise is constant blacksmiths hammering at their forges, carpenters repairing wooden structures, servants calling to one another, livestock braying and bleating, and the ever-present sound of men training with weapons. Privacy is non-existent. Even as a knight, your private chamber is frequently entered by servants, your squire, and occasionally the Baron himself if he has need of you. The castle is cold in winter and stifling in summer. The thick stone walls that provide protection from attackers also trap moisture, making everything feel damp regardless of the weather outside. Rushes strewn on the floors to absorb dirt and spills are changed infrequently, becoming breeding grounds for fleas and other vermin. Smoke from fireplaces fills the upper portions of rooms because chimneys are inefficient, making your eyes water and throat itch after prolonged exposure. You make your way to the training grounds, passing the castle's other inhabitants going about their daily tasks. Servants nod respectfully as you pass, though you catch a few rolling their eyes once your back is turned. Despite your noble status as a knight, you are not particularly well liked. The common folk see you as an entitled thug who enjoys privileges they can never hope to attain, while contributing little beyond swinging a sword, and occasionally collecting taxes on behalf of the Baron. They're not entirely wrong. Relationships with squires, servants, lords, and enemies. The training ground is already busy with activity when you arrive. Other knights are sparring with blunted weapons, men-at-arms are practicing formations, and squires dart between them, fetching water, adjusting armor, and generally making themselves useful. Your squire, Thomas, trails behind you, carrying your lance and practice shield. You have a complicated relationship with the boy. He's not your son, but you're responsible for his education and welfare. You're supposed to be teaching him the skills he'll need to become a knight himself someday. How to ride, fight, hunt, and observe the complex social codes that govern noble behavior. In reality, you mostly use him as a servant, having him polish your armor, care for your horse, and fetch your meals. You're not a particularly good mentor, but you're far from the worst. Some knights beat their squires regularly, treating them with casual cruelty that borders on sadism. Others take advantage of them sexually, a grim reality of medieval power dynamics that histories often gloss over. You merely neglect Thomas, which, in the hierarchy of squire-knight relationships, practically makes you a saint. The Baron's master-at-arms, Sir Godfrey, sees you arrive and grunts in acknowledgement. He's an old knight, past 50, ancient by medieval standards, with a face like a battered anvil and a permanently dislocated shoulder that gives him a lopsided appearance. He survived the Crusades and dozens of battles since, making him something of a living legend. The fact that he's lived this long in a profession where men regularly die in their 20s is testament to either his skill or his luck, probably. Both late again, Sir William, he growls. Though you're actually early, it's just his way of establishing dominance. In the rigid hierarchy of medieval society, he outranks you by virtue of his position and experience, and he never lets you forget it. The Baron wants us ready to ride by Tiers, he continues, referring to the third canonical hour, roughly 9 a.m. There's been reports of bandits harassing travelers on the North Road, probably just hungry peasants, but the Baron wants a show of force. You nod, suppressing a sigh. This is the reality of knighthood, not glorious battles against worthy opponents, but petty errands of violence against desperate people. The bandits are likely former farmers whose crops failed or who were displaced by war. They're stealing to survive, and your job is to hunt them down and mete out the Baron's justice, which typically involves hanging. But you don't voice these thoughts. Your position depends on the Baron's favor, and questioning his orders is a quick way to find yourself landless and lordless, a knight-errant, forced to sell your sword to whoever will have you, one step away from becoming a bandit yourself. So instead, you move to the practice yard, draw your sword, and begin warming up with basic cuts and guards. Your muscles protest, still stiff from yesterday and the cold morning air, but you push through the discomfort. This is your life, constant preparation for violence that is alternately tedious and terrifying. Across the yard, you catch sight of Sir Roland, a knight from a neighboring barony who's visiting your lord on some diplomatic errand. He sees you looking and sneers. There's bad blood between you. He defeated you soundly in a tournament last summer, taking your best horse as a prize and making sure everyone knew of your humiliation. In the intensely honor-conscious world of knighthood, such slights are rarely forgotten or forgiven. He's your enemy, though you'll never engage in open hostility without the sanction of your respective lords. Instead, your enmity plays out in subtle ways: barbed comments at feasts, accidental fouls during tournaments, and a constant jockeying for position and favor. It's exhausting, this perpetual dance of masculinity and aggression. But it's the water you swim in, as natural and necessary as breathing. Chivalry, the myth versus the mud-covered, violent reality. As you practice your sword work, a group of noble ladies appears on the walkway overlooking the training yard. Among them is the Baron's daughter, Lady Eleanor, a young woman of 17 who's already been married and widowed once. The knights immediately straighten their postures and begin performing with more flourish, hoping to catch the lady's attention. This is where the myth of chivalry collides with reality. The romantic notion of the knight as the perfect gentleman, brave, courteous, honorable, and devoted to the service of ladies bears little resemblance to your actual existence. The code of chivalry, as an organized, coherent set of principles, doesn't really exist in your time. It's a later invention, a romanticized ideal that will be retroactively applied to your era by writers and poets looking to sanitize the brutal reality of medieval warfare. In practice, your relationship with concepts like honor and courtesy is complicated. Yes, you observe certain formalities, you bow to ladies, you follow the protocols of tournaments, you swear elaborate oaths of fealty to your lord. But these are social conventions, not moral imperatives. They exist alongside your primary function, violence. You are, fundamentally, a professional killer. You were trained from childhood to deliver death efficiently with a variety of weapons. Your status in society comes from your ability to intimidate, maim, and kill others. Your armor, your horse, your sword, these trappings of knighthood that later ages will romanticize, are tools of your deadly trade. And while poets might later sing of knights rescuing damsels and fighting for love, the reality is far more transactional. Marriage among the nobility is about political alliances and property transfers, not romance. The courtly love that troubadours celebrate is largely a literary convention, not a lived experience for most knights. Your own marriage was arranged. When you were 22, the daughter of a minor lord, cementing an alliance between your families. She died in childbirth 2 years later, along with the infant. You haven't remarried, though your lord has been making noises about finding you another match, probably to some wealthy merchant's daughter, as your lord is perpetually short of cash. As for protecting the weak and upholding justice, noble ideals clash awkwardly with your frequent role as the enforcer of your lord's will, regardless of whether that will is just or merciful. When peasants can't pay their taxes, it's knights like you who evict them from their homes. When your lord wants to clear land for hunting, it's knights who drive off the farmers who have worked that land for generations. You're not a monster few. People are, in their own minds, but your place in the feudal hierarchy makes you complicit in its cruelties. This is the mud-covered reality beneath the shining armor of chivalric myth, tournaments, jousts, and blunt force head trauma. The Baron announces a small tournament to entertain his guests before the bandit hunting expedition. Your heart sinks. Tournaments aren't the glamorous spectacles depicted in modern media. They're brutal, dangerous affairs where serious injury is common and death is an ever-present possibility. Despite what romantic tales suggest, there's nothing chivalrous about having a lance. Splinter against your helmet at 40 miles per hour. You and your fellow knights are herded to the makeshift lists along narrow stretch of ground outside the castle walls. There's no elegant pavilion, no fluttering banners, those are for royal tournaments. Not this backwater display, just a churned-up field with a rope marking the dividing line. There isn't even a proper tilt barrier that innovation won't become standard for another century. This means you'll be charging directly at your opponent with nothing preventing your horses from colliding. Your squire helps. You mount your war, the magnificent, gleaming stallion of legend, but a sturdy, ill-tempered, gelding with scars on its flanks and a tendency to bite. The horse is worth more than you are in terms of pure economics. A good warhorse costs as much as a modern sports car, representing years of specialized breeding and training. When knights are captured in battle, their horses are often considered more valuable prizes than the knights themselves. Thomas hands you your lance 11 feet of solid ash wood with an iron tip blunted for tournament use. Though blunted as a relative term, it can still cave in your skull if it hits right. The lance weighs around 15 pounds, and holding it steady while controlling your horse with your knees alone is a skill that took years to master. Your helmet for jousting is a great helmet, fully enclosed metal bucket that sits on your shoulders, with only narrow eye slits for vision. Once it's on, your world shrinks to a letterbox view straight ahead. You can't see up, down, or to the sides. The sound of your breathing echoes loudly inside the metal chamber, and sweat immediately begins running down your face with nowhere to go. The first opponent is Sir Roland, because of course it is. The Master-at-Arms knows about your rivalry and has a sadistic sense of humor. You can almost see Roland smirking behind his helm as he takes position at the opposite end of the field. A flag drops, and you dig your spurs into your horse's flanks. The animal lunges forward, quickly building to a gallop. You lower your lance, tucking it under your arm and aiming at Roland's shield. The ground thunders beneath you, the weight of the horse and your armor creating a bone-jarring vibration that travels up your spine. The distance closes with terrifying speed. You focus on Roland's shield, trying to judge the point of impact, but it's nearly impossible with your limited vision. At the last second, you realize he's aiming not for your shield but for your helmet, a dangerous and unsporting target. The impact comes like a thunderclap. Your lance strikes his shield and shatters, sending splinters flying. His lance hits your helmet with a sound like a blacksmith's hammer, snapping your head back and sending stars exploding across your vision. You somehow stay in the saddle, though your ears ring and your neck feels like it's been stretched on a rack. This is the reality of jousting. Not an elegant sport, but a concussion delivery system. Modern research on jousting injuries suggests that knights regularly experienced brain trauma equivalent to that of a car crash. The repeated impacts over years of tournaments led to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, similar to what's seen in modern football players and boxers. That famous medieval knight's valor was often indistinguishable from traumatic brain injury. You complete 3 more passes against different opponents, taking another solid hit to the shoulder that you're certain has dislocated something, and delivering a good strike that unseats a younger knight, sending him crashing to the ground in a clatter of metal. The crowd, mostly castle servants and men-at-arms, cheers. The noble ladies on their viewing platform applaud with practiced grace, though you suspect they're more bored than impressed. When the jousting concludes, you remove your great helm, gasping for fresh air. Your face is slick with sweat, your hair plastered to your skull. Your vision is still slightly blurred from Roland's hit, and you're having trouble focusing. Thomas helps you dismount, and you stagger slightly, feeling nauseous. You should see the bone setter, my lord, Thomas suggests, eyeing you with concern. Later, you grunt, though you know later means never unless it's life-threatening. Medieval knights didn't have the luxury of taking time off for injuries. Unless you were physically incapable of mounting a horse or holding a weapon, you were expected to fulfill your duties. Admitting weakness was admitting vulnerability, and in the predatory world of feudal politics, that was tantamount to suicide. Besides, the medieval medical care awaiting you is almost as frightening as the injuries themselves. Religion, rituals, and relics. Before the bandit hunting expedition departs, the castle's priest insists on blessing the knights and their weapons. You line up in the castle's small chapel, the air thick with incense and the musty smell of old stone. The chapel is dark, illuminated only by a few sputtering candles and the colored light filtering through a single stained glass window depicting Saint Michael slaying a dragon, an aspirational image for knights that subtly reinforces your role as the martial arm of Christendom. Religion is inextricably woven into your life as a knight. Your induction into knighthood included religious elements, a night of prayer and vigil, a blessing of your sword, vows spoken before a priest. These rituals gave divine sanction to your violent profession, transforming you from a mere warrior into a defender of the church. The priest, Father Ambrose, is a thin man with rheumy eyes and breath that smells perpetually of cheap wine. He moves down the line of knights, sprinkling holy water on each of you and muttering Latin phrases you only partially understand. When he reaches you, the water hits your face like tiny, cold needles, and you resist the urge to flinch. Bene Domini, Arma, Ista, et Sanctifica, Servum Tuum, Bless, O Lord, these arms, and sanctify your servant. You mutter Amen at the appropriate moment, more out of habit than devotion. Your relationship with God is complicated. Like most people in the 12th century, you don't question the existence of the divine, but your understanding of theology is rudimentary at best. You pray before battles and tournaments, where a small reliquary containing what you've been told is a splinter of the true cross, it's probably just ordinary wood, and observe the required feast days and fasts. But your faith is practical rather than intellectual, a series of rituals and obligations rather than a deeply felt spiritual connection. After blessing the knights, Father Ambrose holds up the castle's prized relics supposedly the fingerbone of Saint Sebastian, patron of archers and soldiers. Each knight processes forward to kiss the silver reliquary, another layer of supernatural protection before facing potential danger. You dutifully press your lips to the cold metal, trying not to think about how many other mouths have done the same without the benefit of modern hygiene. Religion serves multiple purposes in your world. It provides comfort in the face of ever-present mortality, offers structure to the calendar and daily life, and most importantly, justifies the social hierarchy that places you above commoners but below your Lord. Divine order mirrors earthly order, God, angels, and saints above, king, lords, knights, and peasants below. Questioning this arrangement is questioning God's will, a dangerous heresy in a time when religious and political authority are nearly indistinguishable. As you leave the chapel, you notice a small shrine in the corner dedicated to Saint Martin of Tours, once a Roman soldier who became a monk and bishop. The contradiction doesn't strike you as unusual. The line between warrior and holy man has always been blurry in your world. From warrior bishops who lead armies to military orders like the Knights Templar, who combine monastic discipline with martial prowess, violence and piety coexist comfortably, each sanctifying the other in a circular logic that allows you to kill in good conscience. The horror of medieval medical care. The bandit hunting expedition is postponed until tomorrow, due to unexpected rain, a common disruption in an age without reliable weather forecasting. This gives you time to finally visit the castle's bone setter about your shoulder, which has swollen to twice its normal size and turned an alarming shade of purple. The castle doesn't have a proper physician. Those are for kings and great lords, not minor baronial holdings. Instead, medical care falls to Brother Luke, a monk with some rudimentary knowledge of herbs and setting bones, supplemented by the local wise woman for ailments that don't respond to his treatments. Brother Luke's surgery is a small, windowless room near the kitchens. It smells of dried herbs, tallow candles, and the distinctive metallic temps of old blood. Various implements hang on the walls: bone saws, cauterizing irons, tongs, and knives of different sizes. Bundles of dried plants dangle from the ceiling beams, and shelves hold clay pots containing ointments, powders, and tinctures of dubious efficacy. Jousting injury. Brother Luke asks as you enter, not looking up from the mortar and pestle ware. He's grinding something green into paste. Sir Roland's lance caught me in the shoulder, you explain, trying to sound casual about the excruciating pain. Brother Luke gestures for you to sit on a wooden stool and remove your tunic. You comply, wincing as the movement sends fresh waves of agony through your shoulder. The monk examines the injury with surprising gentleness, his fingers probing the swollen joint. Dislocated, he pronounces. We'll need to put it back. Medieval. Medicine is a strange blend of practical knowledge, religious faith, and outright superstition. Brother Luke understands anatomy well enough to diagnose and treat a dislocated shoulder. But his understanding of why injuries heal or fester is based on the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, which must be kept in balance. This leads to treatments that range from occasionally effective to actively harmful. Drink this first, he says, handing you a small clay cup filled with a bitter-smelling liquid. Poppy syrup and strong wine. It won't take away the pain entirely, but it will dull it. You down the concoction, grimacing at the taste. Pain management in the medieval period is primitive at best. There's no standardization of doses, no understanding of side effects or contraindications. The line between medicine and poison is often just a matter of quantity. While waiting for the poppy syrup to take effect, Brother Luke prepares his tools and explains his theory of your injury. Your humors are out of balance, much blood has gathered in the joint. After I set the bone, I'll need to bleed you to restore equilibrium. You nod, knowing there's no point in arguing. Bloodletting is a standard treatment for almost every ailment in medieval medicine, based on the erroneous belief that disease is caused by an excess of blood or bad blood that must be removed. The fact that patients often feel weaker after bloodletting is interpreted as evidence that the treatment is working. Drawing out the illness with the blood, the poppy syrup begins to take effect, creating a pleasant floating sensation that doesn't entirely mask the pain but makes it seem less immediate, less important somehow. Brother Luke positions himself behind you, grips your arm and shoulder in a specific way, and without warning, wrenches the joint. The pain is apocalyptic, cutting through the drug haze like a hot knife. You hear someone screaming and realize it's you, but almost as quickly as it began, the agony subsides to a dull throb as the joint slides back into place. Sweat pours down your face, and you feel lightheaded. Good, Brother Luke says, sounding satisfied. Now for the bleeding. He takes out a small metal box containing several leeches, fat black creatures that writhe obscenely when he picks them up. With methodical care, he applies 3 of them to your shoulder, where they immediately attach and begin to swell as they feed on your blood. Leave these on until they drop off naturally, he instructs. Then apply this poultice of comfrey and yarrow twice daily. He hands you a small pot of the green paste he was grinding earlier. It smells strongly of herbs and something less identifiable, possibly animal fat or beeswax as a binding agent. You leave, brother. Luke's surgery with your shoulder feeling somewhat better, but 3 leeches still attached to it, visibly pulsing as they engorge themselves. This is the state of medical care available to you, a disquieting mixture of practical first aid and pseudoscientific theories that have more to do with tradition than effectiveness. For major injuries, the prospects are even grimmer. Battlefield wounds often lead to infection in an era before antiseptics or antibiotics. Survival rates for amputations, common necessity for crushed limbs or gangrenous wounds, hover around 25%. Surgery is performed without anesthesia beyond alcohol, opium, or herb-based sedatives of unpredictable potency. Surgeons pride themselves on speed rather than precision, racing to complete procedures before shock kills the patient. Many knights die not from the initial injury but from the subsequent infection, a slow, painful death that can take days or weeks. Others survive physically but are permanently disabled, their fighting careers ended by injuries that modern medicine would consider treatable in this context. Your dislocated shoulder and accompanying leech therapy counts as getting off lightly. Weapon, maintenance, battle preparation, and death on the field. Back in your chamber, with the leeches finally detached and disposed of, you turn your attention to preparing for tomorrow's expedition. This means caring for your weapons, a task you don't trust to anyone else, not even Thomas. Your sword is the most valuable and personal of your possessions. A well-crafted sword in the 12th century costs the equivalent of a modern luxury car, representing hundreds of hours of skilled labor by specialized craftsmen. The blade is pattern-welded steel, created by repeatedly folding and hammering iron to remove impurities and increase strength. The hilt is simple but functional, with a leather-wrapped grip that bears the impressions of your hand from years of use. You examine the edge carefully, looking for nicks or dulling from your last training session. Finding a few minor imperfections, you take out your whetstone, apply a small amount of oil, and begin the methodical process of sharpening. The repetitive motion is almost meditative, giving you time to think about the coming expedition. Hunting bandits is dangerous work, but not for the romantic reasons depicted in ballads and tales. The danger isn't from facing skilled opponents in honorable combat, it's from ambushes, hidden pitfalls, arrows fired from concealment, and the constant risk of infection from even minor wounds. Bandits fight desperately because capture means certain death by hanging. They have nothing to lose, which makes them unpredictable and therefore dangerous. The actual fighting, when it happens, bears little resemblance to the choreographed duels of modern films. Combat in full armor is exhausting, ungraceful, and brutally direct. There are no elaborate flourishes or witty exchanges of banter, just the desperate attempt to find gaps in your opponent's defense while protecting your own vulnerable points. The kill, when it comes, is rarely clean or quick. Knights train to target the less protected areas, the face if the helmet has an opening, the armpit when the arm is raised, the back of the knee, the groin. A sword thrust to the torso might not penetrate mail, but the blunt force trauma can still break ribs, rupture organs, and cause internal bleeding. Death on the medieval battlefield is rarely instantaneous, it's a messy, lingering affair, with the wounded often taking hours or days to die from their injuries. You've killed men before in tournaments that got out of hand, in skirmishes along disputed borders, in one memorable instance when bandits attacked your small party while traveling between baronies. The experience never becomes easier, never becomes routine. Each death stays with you, accumulating like scar tissue over your conscience. This is another aspect of knighthood that the romantic tales gloss over the psychological toll of dealing death as your profession. There's no word for stress in the 12th century, no understanding of the mental wounds that parallel the physical ones. Knights who become withdrawn, irritable, prone to nightmares or excessive drinking are simply considered melancholic or weak-spirited. The medieval mind has no framework for understanding psychological trauma as distinct from moral or spiritual failing, yet the symptoms are recorded in chronicles and personal accounts. Knights who cannot sleep without a light burning, knights who startle at sudden noises, knights who turn to excessive prayer, self-flagellation, or drinking to quiet their memories. Some eventually abandon their martial careers entirely, retreating to monasteries or hermitages in search of peace. Others become increasingly reckless in battle, as if seeking the death they've dealt to so many others. You've seen the signs in yourself, the dreams that wake you, sweating and shouting, the sudden flashes of memory triggered by ordinary sounds or smells, the growing heaviness in your chest that no amount of prayer seems to lift. But like your physical injuries, you ignore these symptoms as much as possible, pushing through by sheer force of will and the understanding that there are no alternatives in your world. With your sword properly sharpened and oiled, you move on. 2. Checking your mail shirt for broken links and your helmet for any damage from today's jousting. Thomas helps with the mail, using small pliers to repair minor breaks and a cloth dampened with oil to prevent rust. It's tedious, necessary work, the unglamorous maintenance that keeps a knight alive. How knights were paid, spoiler, not well. As you work, your thoughts turn to more mundane concerns, specifically money. Despite the popular image of knights living in luxury, your financial situation is precarious at best. The economics of knighthood in the 12th century are complex and often disadvantageous to all but the highest-ranking knights. As a landed knight, you hold a small manor granted by your lord in exchange for military service. The income from this, land rents from peasant farmers, a share of their harvest, fees from the use of your mill and ovens is supposed to support you, your household, and the expensive equipment required of your station. In theory, it's a straightforward exchange, land for loyalty and service. In practice, the arrangement is less favorable than it appears. The costs of maintaining your status as a knight are enormous. Your armor, weapons, and warhorse represent a small fortune. When damaged or lost, they must be replaced at your own expense. Your household modest by noble standards, but still including your squire, a groom for your horses, and a manservant requires feeding and small wages. Your participation in tournaments often costs more in equipment damage and entry fees than you gain in prizes unless you're consistently successful. Moreover, your lord has ways of extracting additional service beyond the standard 40 days per year stipulated in your oath of fealty. There are voluntary contributions to his coffers when he faces unexpected expenses, gifts expected on major feast days, and the obligation to host him and his entourage when he visits your lanza, ruinously expensive honor that can deplete your stores and treasury in a matter of days. For landless knights, those who haven't been granted a fief, the situation is even more precarious. They rely entirely on wages paid by their lord or prizes won in tournaments. In peacetime, they might be retained for a nominal fee, expected to maintain their equipment and readiness while receiving barely enough to live on. In wartime, there's the potential for profit through ransoms and plunder, but also the very real risk of death, capture, or crippling injury. The gap between the wealthiest knights, those with multiple manors or valuable captives to ransom. The poorest is vast. At the bottom of the knightly class are men barely distinguishable from common soldiers, except for their title and the social expectations that come with it. These knights often fall into debt trying to maintain appearances, pawning their armor or selling their horses, sometimes ending up as mercenaries or even outlaws when their resources are exhausted. Your own position is somewhere in the middle, comfortable enough in good years, precarious in bad ones. A poor harvest, a lost tournament, or an expensive injury can quickly erode whatever financial cushion you've managed to accumulate. You live not in luxury, but in a state of constant calculation, weighing expenses against income, obligations against opportunities. This economic reality shapes your decisions and relationships. It's why you tolerate the Baron's occasional slights and unreasonable demands. It's why you carefully cultivate relationships with merchants who might extend credit in lean times. It's why you're considering the Baron's suggestion of marriage to a merchant's daughter, despite the slight loss of status such a match would represent. Her dowry would provide a much-needed infusion of cash for all the pageantry and romance. Later, associated with knighthood, the day-to-day reality is as much about financial survival as martial prowess. You are, in many ways, an early form of the working nobility, a man with a prestigious title and all the expensive obligations that come with it, but often without the resources to comfortably fulfill them. As night falls and you complete your preparations for tomorrow's expedition, this economic precariousness adds another layer of pressure to an already stressful existence. You need to perform well on this mission, not just for honor or duty, but because failure might mean the Baron seeks a more capable knight to hold your landsleeving. You landless and lordless in a world that has little use for knights without either PTSD, amputations, and what counts as retirement. The bandit hunting expedition proved successful, if you can call it that. Your party found the outlaws starving peasants, mostly with a couple of desperate former soldiers among them. The fight was brief and brutal. You personally killed 2 men, one with a sword thrust through the neck, another with a mace blow that caved in his unprotected skull. The survivors were rounded up to be hanged tomorrow as an example to others who might consider banditry. Now you sit alone in your chamber, a cup of strong wine in hand, trying to stop the shaking that started on the ride back to the castle. This isn't fear at the least, not fear of any external threat. It's something deeper, a trembling that comes from within and refuses to be controlled by will alone. The faces of the men you killed today have joined the gallery of the dead that haunts your dreams. You can't remember when these episodes began, perhaps after your first tournament death, or the border skirmish 3 years ago where you killed a boy no older than Thomas who had taken up arms with the enemy. Regardless of when it started, the pattern is familiar. The shaking hands, the racing heart, the cold sweat, the difficulty breathing, as if your chainmail has suddenly constricted around your chest despite having been removed hours ago. There's no name for what you're experiencing in the 12th century. Later ages will call it post-traumatic stress disorder, combat fatigue, or shell shock, but for you, it's simply a weakness of spirit that must be overcome. Some nights turn to prayer, spending hours on their knees seeking divine absolution for the blood on their hands. Others lose themselves in drink, women, or increasingly reckless behavior, courting death as if to balance the scales for the lives they've taken. You've seen older knights wake screaming in shared quarters during campaigns, witnessed hardened Veterans reduced to trembling wrecks by sounds reminiscent of Badler, blacksmith's hammer. A sudden clash of metal, a scream of pain from the infirmary. These men are often ridiculed or ostracized, their suffering interpreted as cowardice or moral failing rather than the natural response to years of witnessing and inflicting. Violence. The wine helps a little. The shaking subsides enough that you can remove your gambeson and check the bandage on your side, where one of the bandits managed to land a lucky strike with a rusty farm implement repurposed as a weapon. The wound isn't deep, but in an age before antibiotics, any breach of the skin is potentially life-threatening. You've seen knights survive horrific battlefield injuries only to die days later from infection. Their bodies swollen and putrid, delirious with fever as death slowly claimed them. Amputations are particularly dreaded. A knight who loses an arm or leg loses not just a limb but his entire identity and livelihood. There are no sophisticated prosthetics in the 12th century. A peg leg if you're lucky, a crutch if you're not, and either way, your fighting days are over. Some lords maintain disabled knights out of loyalty or obligation, finding them positions that don't require physical prowess. Castellan, steward, or master artorms training the next generation. But many more find themselves discarded, reliant on charity or family if they have it, begging if they don't, even without catastrophic injury. The cumulative damage of a knightly career eventually takes its toll. By 40, most knights are effectively combat ineffective, their bodies too battered by years of training, tournaments, and warfare to continue at the same level. The constant weight of armor leads to chronic back and joint problems. Repeated concussions from jousting and combat cause memory issues, headaches, and mood disturbances. Old wounds ache in cold weather, partially healed fractures limit mobility, and the overall wear and tear of a violent life leaves them diminished versions of their former selves. This is when the lucky ones, those who've managed to accumulate enough wealth or land, can transition to a more administrative role, supervising younger knights and managing their estates. This isn't retirement in the modern sense. Medieval society has no concept of work followed by decades of leisure. It's more a gradual shifting of responsibilities as physical capabilities decline. A slow step back from the front lines of violence to its supporting infrastructure. The unlucky ones, those without sufficient resources or powerful patrons, grimmer prospects. Some join mercenary companies, where their experience is valued even as their physical prowess wanes. Others take minor positions in noble households, trading on their knightly status for room and board while performing duties little different from common servants. The poorest might end up as temple guards or even bandits themselves, their fall from grace complete as they become the very outlaws they once hunted. Many turn to religion in their declining years, entering monasteries not from spiritual calling, but as the only institution that will provide for them in their brokenness. These monastery infirmaries house numerous former knights, their bodies and minds shattered by decades of violence, living out their remaining years in prayer and pain. As you finish your wine, you wonder which fate awaits you. At 28, you're already feeling the effects of your chosen profession, the chronically dislocated shoulder, the knee that doesn't fully straighten, the occasional difficulty recalling names or events. How many more years can you continue before you, too, must step back from the life that defines you? And what will be left of you when that day comes? The slow, uncomfortable march toward death or irrelevance. The next morning brings a new pain, a dull ache in your lower back that wasn't there yesterday. You ignore it, as you ignore all the minor discomforts that constitute the background noise of your existence. Thomas helps you dress, and you notice he's sporting a black eye that wasn't there last night. What happened to your face? You ask, more out of idle curiosity than genuine concern. Got into an argument with one of Sir Roland's squires, my lord, Thomas replies, eyes downcast. He said some things about your performance in yesterday's joust that couldn't stand. You grunt non-committally, though you're secretly touched by the boy's loyalty. It's easy to forget that beneath his servile exterior, Thomas is developing his own sense of honor and identity, shaped in part by his observations of you. For better or worse, you are the model of knighthood he aspires to emulate. This is one of the more complex aspects of the knightly existence, the knowledge that you're perpetuating a system that will break others as it has broken you. When Thomas eventually achieves knighthood, assuming he survives his training and early career, he will face the same physical hardships, moral compromises, and eventual decline that you're experiencing. Yet you continue to train him, to prepare him for this life, because what other option is there? The alternatives available to someone of his station, farmer, tradesman, monk, seem impossibly dull compared to the allure of knighthood. Tarnished though it may be, you make your way to the great hall for the morning meal, nodding to fellow knights still nursing their own injuries from yesterday's activities. Sir Godfrey, the aging master-at-arms, catches your eye and gestures for you to join him at his table. You comply, curious about this unexpected invitation. You handled yourself well yesterday, he says, without preamble, tearing a chunk of bread with fingers gnarled by arthritis, both in the joust and against those bandits. Thank you, Sir Godfrey, you reply, surprised by the rare compliment from a man known for his parsimony with praise. He studies you for a moment, his rheumy eyes surprisingly sharp in his weathered face. How old are you now? 28, 29. Sir, he nods, as if confirming something to himself. I was about your age when I realized this life has an expiration date. Not just death, that comes for everyone, but the end of usefulness. A knight who can't fight is like a horse that can't run, or a hawk that can't hunt. Ornamental at best. You're not sure how to respond to this grim observation, so you simply wait for him to continue. I've seen your type before, he says, gesturing vaguely toward you with a piece of bread. Good fighters who think too much. The kind who wake up sweating from dreams they won't talk about. The kind who wonder if there's more to life than following orders and splitting skulls. Your surprise must show on your face, because he gives a dry chuckle. You think you're the first. There's always a few in every generation. Most drink themselves to death or get careless in battle, a convenient form of suicide that doesn't damn their souls. The smart ones, though, he leans forward, lowering his voice. The smart ones plan ahead. Plan ahead for what? You ask, though you suspect you know the answer. For the day when your body can't do this anymore. For the day when you can't. Ignore the shaking or the nightmares or the pain. For the day when you look in a mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. There's something in his voice of vulnerability, a humanity that you've never heard before from this gruff old warrior. For a moment, the carefully maintained facade of the hardened veteran slips, revealing the wounded man beneath. What did you do? You ask quietly. He smiles, a surprisingly gentle expression on his typically stern face. I made myself indispensable in ways that don't require physical prowess. I learned to read and write when most knights were still making their mark with an X. I studied maps and strategy. I cultivated relationships with merchants and craftsmen who could provide quality supplies at fair prices. By the time my sword arm began to fail, I had made myself too valuable to discard. You consider his words, seeing your possible future. In this man who has somehow navigated the treacherous transition from warrior to elder statesman, it's not a path you had considered, having always assumed you would either die gloriously in battle or fade into obscure poverty like so many former knights. Think about it, Sir Godfrey says, rising with a wince as his joints protest. You have time yet, but less than you imagine. Use it wisely. He leaves you with these sobering thoughts, shuffling away with the careful gait of a man whose body is a catalogue of old injuries. Each step a negotiation with pain. The rest of your day passes in a blur of routine duties training with younger knights, inspecting the castle's defences, attending the Baron as he holds court and passes judgment on minor disputes among his subjects. You perform these tasks automatically, your mind preoccupied with Sir Godfrey's warning and the future it implies. That evening, you find yourself in the castle's small library, really just a closet with a few dozen books and scrolls, most of them religious texts or record-keeping ledgers. You've never spent much time here, your education having focused on martial skills rather than literary ones. You can read, but slowly and with difficulty, your fingers tracing the words as your lips silently form them. You select a volume on military strategy, the leather binding cracked and worn from previous readers. Opening it carefully, you begin the laborious process of deciphering the text, determined to follow Sir Godfrey's implicit advice. If you cannot remain a knight forever, perhaps you can become something else, something that values the mind when the body begins to fail as you struggle with the unfamiliar words. You become aware of someone watching you. Looking up, you see Lady Eleanor, the Baron's daughter, standing in the doorway with an expression of mild surprise. "Sir William," she says, her tone indicating she didn't expect to find a knight in the library. "I didn't realize you had scholarly interests." There's a hint of amusement in her voice that makes you bristle slightly. The assumption that knights are merely brutes with swords is common among the more educated nobility, and while often accurate, it still stings to be so easily categorized. "I'm trying to expand my usefulness, my lady," you reply, more stiffly than intended. She enters the room fully, her curiosity apparently piqued. "May I?" she asks, gesturing to the book. You hand it to her, and she examines the title page, Vegetis de Re Militari. A good choice for a knight, though this translation leaves much to be desired. You're surprised by her familiarity with the text. Women's education in the 12th century varies widely depending on their status and family attitudes, but it's unusual for even noble women to have extensive literary knowledge. "You've read it?" you ask. "This and many others," she confirms, handing the book back. "My father believes an educated daughter makes a more valuable diplomatic asset. I'm expected to make a second marriage soon, preferably to someone who can strengthen our family's position." There's a matter-of-factness to her statement that belies the personal implications. Lady Eleanor, like you, is a piece in the feudal chess game, her value determined by her utility to those above her in the hierarchy. Her first marriage at 15 to an elderly lord ended when he died of a winter cough within months of the wedding. Now, at 17, she faces another arranged match, her preferences secondary to political considerations. If you're interested in military texts, she continues, I could recommend several that might be more accessible for someone unaccustomed to scholarly reading. You should be offended by her assessment of your literacy, but it's accurate enough that pride gives way to practicality. I would appreciate that, my lady. A ghost of a smile crosses her face. Come to the library tomorrow evening. I'll have some selections ready. She leaves as quietly as she arrived, leaving you to wonder if this unexpected interaction represents a new ally in your quest for a sustainable future, or merely a noblewoman's passing amusement at the sight of a knight attempting scholarship. Either way, it's a reminder that the path forward requires adapting to changing circumstances, forming new alliances, and developing skills beyond those that have defined your life thus far. As you return to your chamber that night, your body aching from the cumulative stress of recent days, you reflect on the precariousness of your position. You are a knight in your prime by medieval standards, yet already the signs of decline are evident. The freshly healed wound in your side will become another scar among many. The dislocated shoulder will never fully recover. Each injury, each battle, each tournament takes something from you that cannot be replaced. The question is not whether you will continue as a knight. Time and physical deterioration will answer that inevitably, but what you will become when that identity is no longer sustainable. Will you find a new role that preserves some measure of dignity and purpose? Will you, like Sir Godfrey, make yourself valuable in ways that transcend physical prowess? Or will you join the ranks of broken men who haunt the margins of society, living embodiments of the system's callous disregard for those who can no longer serve its violent ends? These are the questions that occupy your mind as you drift towards sleep, your body heavy with fatigue, your future uncertain in a world that has little use for warriors who can no longer fight. The grim reality of a knight's life expectancy. The changing of the seasons brings new challenges and reminders of mortality. Winter in a medieval castle is a miserable experience. The stone walls that provide protection in wartime become conduits for cold, radiating chill into every chamber. Drafts find their way through arrow slits and ill-fitting doors. The central hearth in the great hall provides some warmth, but heat barely reaches the peripheral rooms where most knights sleep. Illness spreads quickly in these conditions. A cough from one of the kitchen servants becomes a respiratory infection that moves through the castle's population like wildfire. Within weeks, almost everyone is afflicted to some degree. For the young and healthy, it's merely an inconvenience a week of discomfort before recovery. For the elderly and infirm, it's potentially fatal. Sir Godfrey succumbs first, his weathered body finally surrendering to an accumulation of age, injury, and illness. They find him one morning in his bed, cold and still, his features relaxed, in a way they never were in life. The castle's inhabitants receive the news with varying degrees of sadness and pragmatism. Death is an omnipresent reality in medieval life, not the sanitized, distant concept it will become in later centuries. The funeral is brief and sparsely attended. Few prayers from Father Ambrose, a modest wooden coffin, a plot in the small cemetery beyond the castle walls. You stand in the biting wind as they lower Sir Godfrey into the ground, reflecting on your last meaningful conversation with him. His warning about planning for the future seems more urgent now, his own end serving as punctuation to his advice. 3 more deaths follow in quick succession: an elderly servant, a young stable boy, and most shockingly, Lady Eleanor's grandmother, who had seemed hale despite her advanced age. The casual brutality of winter mortality reinforces what you already know. Life expectancy in the 12th century is precarious at best, with death coming from myriad sources: disease, injury, childbirth, famine, or violence. For knights, the statistics are particularly grim. Few reach 50, with most dying in their 30s or 40s from battlefield injuries, tournament accidents, or the long-term consequences of physical trauma. Those who survive into old age are rare exceptions, usually men who transitioned to administrative roles or who were wealthy enough to retire from active service. The causes of death are varied but predictable. Infection claims many, turning survivable wounds lethal in an era before antiseptics. Blunt force trauma from tournaments and battles leads to internal injuries that medieval medicine cannot diagnose, let alone treat. Falls from horses result in broken necks and fractured skulls. Chronic conditions developed over years of physical hardship, joint deterioration, digestive disorders from poor diet, respiratory problems from sleeping in damp conditions, erode health until a minor illness becomes the final straw. As you help carry Sir Godfrey's coffin to its final resting place, you can't help but wonder who will carry yours and when. The statistical likelihood is that you've already lived more than half your life, perhaps substantially more. The next decade will likely see a sharp decline in your physical capabilities, followed by either adaptation to a new role or the rapid descent into irrelevance and poverty that awaits knights who fail to secure a place in the changing landscape of their lives. It's a sobering thought, but one that increasingly occupies your mind as you witness the fragility of existence around you. The winter deaths are merely a concentrated version of the attrition that occurs year-round, the constant reminder that medieval life is, in Thomas Hobbes's future words, nasty, brutish, and short. Yet despite this grim reality, or perhaps because of it, to find yourself more determined to make use of whatever time remains. Your evening sessions in the library with Lady Eleanor have continued, evolving from her simple recommendations of texts to actual instruction. She's a patient teacher, guiding you through difficult passages, explaining concepts that your education as a knight never covered in return. You found yourself offering insights into the practical aspects of warfare that academic texts often misunderstand or oversimplify. Your experiences on actual battlefields provide context that Lady Eleanor, for all her reading, cannot possess. It's an unexpected exchange of knowledge, crossing the boundaries of gender and class in ways that would raise eyebrows if conducted less discreetly. There's no romance in these interactions. You're both too aware of the social and political realities that govern your lives for such indulgence, but there is a growing mutual respect, a recognition of capabilities that extend beyond your prescribed roles. In a small way, you're both defying the limitations imposed by a rigid social structure, creating space for individual growth within its confines. As winter gradually releases its grip and the castle's population begins to recover from illness, you realize that Sir Godfrey's death has created a vacancy master-at-arms, a position that requires martial knowledge but not necessarily the physical prowess of an active knight. It's a role that would provide security and status even as your body inevitably declines. Exactly the kind of transition the old knight had advised you to seek. The competition will be fierce, with several older knights likely to petition the Baron for the position. Your advantage is your combination of practical experience and your newly acquired theoretical knowledge, courtesy of Lady Eleanor's tutelage. Whether it will be enough remains to be seen, but for the first time in years, you find yourself looking toward the future with something other than resignation or dread. This, perhaps, is the most realistic form of retirement available to a knight in the 12th century. not an end to service, but a transformation of it, a repurposing of accumulated knowledge and experience in ways that extend useful life beyond physical prime. It's not the glorious end celebrated in Chanson's digest, nor is it the comfortable dotage of modern retirement. It's merely survival with dignity, a modest ambition in a world where even that is far from guaranteed. As spring returns to the castle, bringing with it renewed activity and the promise of tournament season, you continue your dual existence, your body by day for the violence that defines your current role, educating your mind by night for the future you hope to secure. Both paths are difficult, both uncertain, but the alternative passive acceptance of inevitable decline is unthinkable. You are a knight. After all, and if there's one quality that defines your kind, it's the stubborn refusal to yield without a fight, even when the opponent is time itself. Years pass. Your hair grays prematurely from stress. Your body accumulates new scars, new aches, new limitations. You secure the position of Master at Arms when your predecessor succumbs to a winter cough. Your unlikely alliance with Lady Eleanor, now married to a northern lord, but still occasionally corresponding, having given you the edge in knowledge and strategic thinking, you train a new generation of knights, passing on both the martial skills that defined your youth and the hard-won wisdom of survival. You watch some of them die in tournaments, in border skirmishes, in petty conflicts, between lords whose names will be forgotten by history. You attend their funerals, stand stoically as their coffins are lowered into the ground, and return to training those who remain, the cycle unbroken. Your squire, Thomas, achieves knighthood and distinguishes himself in service to the barons. Son, who succeeds his father when the old man finally dies. You feel a complicated pride in Thomas's accomplishments, tempered by the knowledge that you've prepared him for a life of violence, pain, and likely early death, the same life that has left you with chronic pain, nightmares, and 1,000-yard stare that younger knights avoid meeting directly. In your 5th decade, long past the age when most knights have died or become irrelevant, you find yourself with an unexpected reputation for wisdom. Your position as Master-at-Arms combined with your self-education and strategic acumen has made you a valued advisor to the new baron. Your opinion is sought on matters beyond war for disputes between vassals, negotiations with neighboring lords, even the occasional legal judgment. It's not the life you imagined when you were first knighted, shining with youth and ambition, certain that glory awaited on some future battlefield. It's quieter, more contemplative, marked by the teaching of others rather than personal achievement. But it's a life with dignity, with purpose, with a measure of respect that many former knights never attain. And yet, the physical toll cannot be denied. By 50, you walk with a pronounced limp from an old tournament injury that never properly healed. Your right hand, broken and reset multiple times, lacks the strength and dexterity it once possessed. Your eyesight has deteriorated to the point where reading requires squinting in good light. Your sleep is frequently interrupted by pain or the persistent nightmares that have been your companions for decades. When a fever takes you one winter, your weakened body unable to fight off what would once have been a minor illness, you face death with the same stoic acceptance that characterized your approach to life. There are no dramatic last words, no glorious end befitting a knight of legend. Just the quiet ebbing of strength in a small chamber, attended by a few who respected you and fewer who might genuinely mourn your passing. They bury you in the castle cemetery. Another warrior returned to the earth, your name destined to fade from memory within a generation or two. Your possessions modest by noble standards, distributed according to your will. Your sword to Thomas, your books to the castle library, your small savings to the church for prayers for your soul. In the grand scheme of medieval history, you were unremarkable one knight among thousands, neither famous nor infamous, a small cog in the vast machinery of feudal society. Your victories won no lasting territory, your defeats lost no crucial battles, your life changed nothing of historical significance. But you lived. You survived in a world designed to use men like you as expendable instruments of violence. You adapted when your body began to fail, found value beyond your sword arm, and died with more dignity than many of your contemporaries. In the harsh reality of medieval knighthood, that modest achievement counts for something. You lived with honor. You died from infected lance splinters. Chivalry is dead, so are you. If you liked this historical bedtime story, like and subscribe. For more brutal history, comment below how long you think you'd last as a medieval knight before crying yourself to sleep in your rusty chainmail. And remember, the next time you romanticize the Middle Ages, at least your toilet doesn't empty into a moat.